Hi everyone, this video covers my pool plans in DFFOO Global in the upcoming arc where Vincent will be featured as a synergy character. You can also refer to the cropped infographic on the left hand side, which was derived from Jakematt's global forecast to see which events these are. As always, I'll also be including a link to the full forecast in the video description, as well as timestamps to the specific banners so that you can use those to skip ahead to the section that you are interested in. Do take note though that although I'll be sharing the reasons and the thought process behind how I make my decisions as to whether to pull or skip, this is really just one of probably many ways to approach the game. A lot of it is also weighted very heavily towards my playstyle and preferences, and they may not be the right approach for a number of players depending on what your playstyle and preferences are. Because of this, generally I will always recommend players to do your own research as well, so that you can at least make the best informed decision whether or not you should pull or skip on the banner. In any case, I'll try to at least elaborate a little bit more around the reasoning behind why I make certain decisions, so that at least you could also possibly take that into consideration as well. First up, just a quick recap about how much resources I spent in the last arc, which was Prishe's LDBT arc. I didn't actually spend quite a lot because I actually skipped 4 out of the 6 banners. So the first banner was actually Prishe, and I went in with tickets because I wanted to use her LD, especially across many of the co-op events in this arc. So I was actually quite lucky that 10 tickets actually already netted me her LD, and I stopped there. I skipped Yuna's banner because I already had all the weapons there, even including Yuna's burst weapon as well, and I wasn't terribly interested in greening Yuna anyway at this point in the game. Coming to Lulu's banner, I went in with tickets there partially because I also wanted to get some of Shulk's gear. I skipped Shulk the first time around, which makes this banner somewhat more valuable for me, and of course I was still hoping to score Prishe's burst weapon on this banner. At 200 tickets, I managed to score Shulk's EX and LD, as well as Lulu's newly released LD as well. Still did not score Prishe BT, but considering that I already had all the other weapons on this banner at this point, I decided to stop at 200 tickets. Next up, we had a rerun of Kate Sith and Porom, as well as Layla, Gilgamesh and Aiko on another banner, and I had to skip both these banners because I already had all the weapons on these 2 banners except only Gilgamesh LDBT, which I wasn't interested in anyway. So it was quite an easy skip for me. And finally, coming to Sai's event, with her being newly released, this was a painful one, but ultimately I decided to skip first because I wanted to see how I would actually do in the upcoming banner with Vincent and Realm. So if I actually get lucky with Realm, then I may come back still to Sai's banner, also partially because this is still one more opportunity for me to potentially score Prishe BT weapon. Okay, so finally coming to the first event in Vincent's LDBT arc, and as always there's going to be 2 banners on this event. The first banner featuring Vincent with a rerun of his LD, because we actually did get his LD as a global first many months ago, but his burst weapon is newly released. Now on the JP side, the secondary LD on this banner was Porom, but since we got Porom early on in Prishe's arc, the current speculation is that the most likely LD on that banner will be Realm instead, and that would make sense because Realm's LD is going to be a newly released LD, and since we all already had Vincent's LD released earlier, having a new LD in the form of Realm's LD sort of makes sense. The second banner features a rerun of Sephiroth LDBT and a rerun of Galuf LD, and both Sephiroth and Galuf will also be getting reworks together with this event. The Sephiroth and Galuf banner is an easy skip for me because I have all the weapons on that banner already, even including Sephiroth's burst weapon, so there's nothing new that I need on that banner. Just a quick description about both Sephiroth and Galuf. Galuf did get quite a nice upgrade with his C90, and anytime any tank-like character gets an upgrade, it's usually a good thing because tank characters in general have quite a lot of value in this game. But Galuf now will start the fight with both his LD buff and cover buff on his allies active, which makes setting up with him significantly easier and faster. And notably also, his LD buff now lasts 9 turns versus in the past where it used to last only 5 turns, and this makes his keeping up his buffs significantly easier compared to before. Beyond the rework in skills, increasing his number of HP dumps and damage overall, notably also his LD counter ability now has 3 HP dumps, which significantly boosts his off-turn damage. Sephiroth still plays largely the same as how he did before. His kit remains the same, and most of his changes comes in the form of damage, where it's upgraded to be more in line with the current meta, and both his S1 and S2 now has a mini AoE HP splash damage tied to it as well. Coming to the highlight banner, which is the Vincent and Realm banner. Starting off first with Vincent. First off, Vincent now will start the fight with both his EX buff and debuff active. The good thing about his LD now is that with his LD buff up, any new debuffs that Vincent inflicts will be extended by 2 turns, and this is quite useful because his debuffs in general have a short duration, especially the attack down debuff with his live wire shot, where before it only lasts for 2 turns, so effectively now that has been doubled from 2 turns to 4 turns. His follow-up attack Chaos Saber now has 3 HP dumps, which significantly boosts his damage overall. His newly released BT is quite notable in terms of the BT aura ability. First off, it has an aura that further reduces the enemy's key stats in the form of attack, defense, max brave and speed by a nice 50%, and this stacks with all the other stat downs that he has in his kit. Now the very unique, although I guess admittedly a little bit niche, is that his BT aura also provides him the ability to lock enemy buffs, meaning that while his BT aura is up, no enemy in the game will be able to apply buffs onto themselves. Coming to Realm, her kit still plays largely the same. Having said that though, on top of the usual damage boosts that a character gets with rework and C90, her newly released LD fixes a lot of the weaknesses that she used to have in her kit. Realm functions as a character who gets many free turns throughout the course of the fight, because her sketch debuff allows her to get 1 free turn anytime an enemy gets a turn, which is somewhat similar to how Shulk and Eldnach acts as well. In the past, this also leads to a problem where she ran out of skill users pretty quickly because her HP++ attack is pretty weak overall, and generally you'd be encouraged to use either her S1 or S2 during her free turns, and she already had limited uses of those to begin with. With her LD though, her LD changes her HP attack to a new HP attack tentacle, but you only get access to this whenever she gets a free turn. This actually allows her to preserve her precious skill users for when she actually takes her non-free turns instead, and therefore gives her great longevity in the fight. One particular thing that I would want to say is that these 2 banners will get released on Dimensions End Transcendence 9, and this can be a rather tough tier overall because the Reckoning stage is a Lufenia Plus difficulty with 2 bosses having a whopping 60 million HP each for a total of 120 million HP pool, and this is by far the largest HP that we have had yet in the GL version of the game. The bosses can be quite tricky because they also grant themselves 5 generic buffs throughout the course of the fight, and any buffs granted on themselves actually also take down the Lufenia orb. So this is where both Vincent and Realm actually comes in pretty handy. Vincent especially since he can uptick the orb with his debuffs, and his BT aura prevents any new buffs being granted. Realm herself should be able to uptick the orb as well because her sketch skill inflicts 2 debuffs per enemy for a total of 4 debuffs. I'm definitely pulling on this banner for Realm's LD, and I hope to get Vincent's BT along the way, and I'm actually even considering tokening Vincent's BT if I don't get it right on this banner itself, because having his burst weapon makes for a significantly easier time on DE Transcendence 9. Moving on to the next event, we have Age Intersecting Wheels, featuring a much needed rework for Age, as well as a newly released LD for him. Some of the key changes Age will receive is that his smokescreen evasion will now last significantly longer at 6 turns. His LD also gives him a new stacking overhead mechanic which significantly boosts the damage in his kit. That's because each time Age evades an attack, it will actually trigger a counter attack with 2 HP dumps and will increase his overhead stacks by 1. When it gets to 2 stacks, so from 0 to 1 and 1 to 2, at 2 stacks his counter will change to a different type of counter called Advent of Phoenix, which hits significantly harder because it has 4 HP dumps. However, after Advent of Phoenix, his stacks will reset to 0, so he'll be back to his default counter again. This means that he gets significantly higher damage per turn attributed to his off-turn damage, and every 2 evades he gets to unload a large HP attack on the enemies. My plan here is still a little bit undecided. I'm leaning more towards using tickets for Age because I kinda like his kit, and I actually like using evasion characters as well, and he's one of the few characters with 100% evasion. I know Size herself also had evasion, so in case you're wondering why I skipped Size, it was really a very painful decision for that, but I wanted to actually save my resource for Vincent and Realm. And like I said, if I get lucky in this arc, I might still go back for Size. The one painful thing though is that if I did token Vincent's BT, it will significantly diminish my interest in this banner because I really don't want to put myself into a situation where I throw tickets for Age and I score Vincent's burst weapon along the way. That would really mean that I've sort of wasted the tokens for Vincent's BT. This event is just 4 days after the release of Dimension's End, so one option is that I could just hold off tokening Vincent's burst weapon until after I've pulled for Age. Just quickly about the secondary character, in the JP version of the game, the secondary LD here was actually Garnet's LD, but since we actually received her LD as a GL first, it's still a bit of a question mark on whether or not there's any changes for Garnet on this banner. Some people are speculating that they may also release Garnet's burst weapon, but in any case, in case you do not know, Garnet is a pretty strong support overall, but a lot of that hinges also on whether or not you have her burst weapon. So if her burst weapon isn't released here, Garnet with just her LD isn't nearly as strong as a green Garnet. For those who still don't have Garnet, of course, one option would be to pull for Garnet's LD here and just use burst tokens to token her burst weapon, and that would give you a complete Garnet, which is still a very strong support even to this day. The final event and also the final LD to be released is actually coming up with King. King is really a very selfish DPS character because beyond DPS, I really don't know what else he brings to the table. That isn't normally a bad thing because you would obviously always depend on DPS to quickly end the fight, and King has it in spades. With his changes, his S1, S2 and EX now has splash on the final attack, and he does also now incorporate re-breaks into his kit. His S2 reload and his LD Both will unbreak and will re-break the enemy, which not only causes the 1 turn break delay, but also gives King a free consecutive turn, because King would get a free consecutive turn each time he breaks an enemy. His LD also provides him a new frame buff that further boosts his offensive stats, and very notably, while his LD buff is up, it actually changes his HP attack to a new attack called Double Bullets. In essence, anytime you press Double Bullets, it's essentially just 2 uses of his S1 back to back. So Double Bullets will deplete 2 charges of his S1 rapid fire, but will do the attacks twice consecutively in that 1 turn. And whenever he gets lower than 2 skill uses left of rapid fire, then Double Bullets will revert back to HP attack. However, don't forget that you can then just use reload to give him back his rapid fire charges, and then you can use his LD again to get Double Bullets back. So essentially this really doubles the damage that he can do, because you are sort of fitting in 2 rapid fires in 1 turn, and this means that he really has quite a lot of DPS potential. Coming to the secondary LD on this banner, which is Jakematt. Jakematt does also receive a rework that focuses on increasing the damage throughout his kit, but his kit actually still otherwise plays the same as it did before. His Crystal Fist is now also 3 HP dumps notably, so that also contributes to his boosted damage. Overall, I don't actually have a lot of interest in this banner, so it is very likely that I'll be skipping here, especially if I've already pulled in the last 2 banners. I don't want to keep pulling on every single banner in one arc. It's really nothing against King actually. I think a lot of the issue why people are skipping King is just due to the reason of timing. King happens to be the last banner released just before the Shinryu era, and many people are actually looking forward and saving their resources so that they can start pulling on FR weapons in the next era. It's also unfortunate that King is released now, because at this point in the meta, I think people tend to value utility a little bit more rather than just raw DPS. There are other DPS options that also has a little bit of utility tied to them, and you can make use of those depending on the stage as well. Okay, so on this part of the video, I'll sort of be covering how I generally categorize all the newly released LDs on this arc. First off, every LD is endgame viable, even if it's so-called the worst LD in the arc. So I generally don't like to think of any character as sort of trash tier. The way I sort of picture things is across 3 different tiers. First is sort of good value, and generally any character I put here I think would provide you a good return of investment, even regardless of who you already have built in your roster. The next category I call role fulfillment, and the characters here are a little bit more iffy. They are actually pretty good at what they do and you can get a lot of value out of them, but part of it also depends on whether or not you already have similar characters in your roster, of which you can sometimes make do without having these new characters. The last category I call as consolation prize, and the main reason characters are put here is because, relatively speaking, you probably see less use out of them versus the other characters in the same arc, and sometimes you can also have other characters that were released that actually can provide more utility or do a better job than the characters in this category. I placed Vincent and Galuf in the good value category, and starting off with Vincent, the main reason I put him there is because not only is he a very strong debuffer, and the fact that he now has access to burst weapon also gives you a pretty unique burst aura. He really excels in debuffing because his high armor is a debuffing high armor. He has debuffs across his skill users and his EX, and now his BT aura also provides an aura like debuff across key stats. So just bringing Vincent into the fight significantly cripples the enemy. But beyond that, the thing that I really like is that his burst aura also provides the added utility of preventing enemy buffs, and although that can be considered to be quite niche because most of the time you can just dispel enemy buffs by using other characters, the fact that buff prevention per se is actually still quite rare, and I kind of like having rare utility readily available in my roster. Galuf, I think, probably doesn't need a lot of explanation on why he's here. Generally, like I said, tanks are good value overall in the game because they tend to get used for quite a long time and provide you safety across a number of endgame content. And now that Galuf has received his C90 and changes, not only is he able to provide you protection, his damage is actually also pretty good as well if you factor in his often counters. Coming to role fulfillment category, I put 3 characters here: Garnet, Realm, and Age. For Garnet, it's actually a little bit iffy. She can actually be considered good value as well, but ultimately I decided to put here in the second category only because I don't think that they will actually re-release her burst weapon, because otherwise then there's 2 burst weapons on this arc. I guess it's still possible considering we did get Gilgamesh burst in the last arc as well, and I think that if Garnet gets a rerun of her burst weapon as well, I probably bump her up to good value because a complete Garnet with a green BT weapon is one of the best, if not the best, support character in the game currently. Or if you are committed to tokening her burst weapon, then I'll probably rate her higher. The only reason why I put her here is that if you just want to pull for her LD and not spend time on her burst weapon, without her burst, her utility and value I think drops significantly, and if with just that, she'll probably be in the role fulfillment category. Realm I put here because she does have very interesting kit in the sense that she gets a lot of turn warping and free turns, and she can also inflict blind, and her sketch summon is a pretty unique attack because the attack has an elemental, but the elemental is dependent on what summon you are actually using. So for example, if you use Ifrit summon, her sketch summon is then a fire elemental attack. This makes Realm into a very versatile attacker because she can fulfill any elemental DPS that you may need for the fight. But I put her here because there really isn't many fights that you would say that you need Realm and no one else can do the job. Usually, if let's say for example, if you need any specific elemental attack, or you need turn warping, or you need to blind the bosses, there are other options that can do that. Obviously Realm can do all of those, so she has some value, but based on that I think it should fit very nicely into the role fulfillment category. As for Age, I think the reason is pretty much the same as well. He does have good utility in being able to provide the party with evasion, and his LD does give him the ability to evade and counter as well, which I really like. But you have Galuf for evade and counter already, and beyond that there's also other means of providing evasion or protection to your party, so I think Age fits into the role fulfillment category. Lastly, we have the consolation prize, and I'll start off with both Sephiroth and Jakematt. I really don't have anything against these two. In fact, even Sephiroth burst aura is pretty unique, and I did actually pull for his BT weapon just for that ability as well. But the thing is that their kit still remains largely the same with these with their reruns here. And if you look back, both Sephiroth and Jakematt weren't used for a long time in their last appearance, and I think this also leads me to believe that even with their appearance here, unless they are a personal favorite of yours, they probably still won't see a lot of use. King, like I said, I think is a victim of timing. It's just really unfortunate because at this point not many people are looking for pure DPS. there are actually quite a lot of options as far as DPS is concerned anyway. And so unless you're a super new player who just joined the game and you really need DPS, in which case King is actually pretty good. I think that you're probably better off just going for another DPS option. So that's it finally for this video. In summary, my plan currently is looking more like I'll be spending tickets for Realm LD. I'll be skipping Sephiroth's banner and maybe throwing tickets for Age as well, but we'll see how I do on Vincent and Realm's banner first. I'll definitely be skipping King's banner. I don't have a lot of interest for him, and I'll likely try to score Vincent's burst weapon here because I really want to use Vincent in Dimensions End tier 9. As always, I hope the video has been helpful, and if you did enjoy the content, please leave a like, comment and subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.